doing. Look, the most important one is inflation. I know families are struggling with the cost of living, and that's why I set it out as my first priority to halve inflation, and we're making progress. Of course, is that as fast as I would like? No. Is it as fast as anyone would like? No. But the numbers most recently that we had showed that we're heading in the right direction. Inflation is coming down, and I think I think people can see light at the end of the tunnel. But look, we've got to stick to the plan. It's not easy to bring down inflation. It requires me to make difficult but responsible decisions on behalf of the country. They're not easy. I get flack for them, but I'm going to do them because they're the right thing for everybody in the long term. And I'm determined to stick to the course and bring inflation down for everyone.
NHS queues are growing. More people waiting for surgery.
Yeah,
that's not working, Prime Minister.
Yeah, look, they are. But if you look at the numbers and what was happening, actually we were making progress after I became Prime Minister. We've put a lot record money into the NHS, and it's very personal for me. And my dad and mum worked in the NHS their entire careers. Funnily enough, and this is a bit of a distraction from what we're saying. I'll get back to it. No, but it's just funny because I was going over some old things the other day, and I found a clipping that my mum had kept of our local, I think it was our local paper where I grew up in Southampton, when my dad had done 25 years at his surgery, and there was a nice picture and a story of him in front of the surgery, and it was just a reminder to me that was our life growing up.
Yes.
I worked for my mum in her pharmacy. It's very personal for me. But look, to your question, because I don't want to avoid it.
No.
Look, yes, they are.
Let me just get this figure out, Prime Minister. It was 7.2 million when you came to office.
Yeah, now it's 7.9, give or take.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah,
It's going the wrong way.
Yeah, but if you look at what happened, I'll just be totally honest with everybody. If you look at what happened, we were actually making progress. We eliminated the number of 2-year waiters. People are waiting really long time. We practically eliminated the number of people waiting 1.5 years. But the reason, and we were making progress on bringing the overall numbers down, what happened? We had industrial action. Okay. We've got strikes. Now, and look, I've taken a very firm but fair point of view. We've accepted recommendations from independent pay review bodies. I'm delighted that the nurses and 1 million other NHS workers accepted the government's pay offer.
Yes.
And they're working really hard to deliver for patients. But unfortunately, we still have groups of people who are not doing that, and they're striking. And that is a reason that the waiting lists are going up. It's as simple as that. I just want to be honest with you. Yes, they are going up. That's the reason they're going up. It's not because we're not putting more money in or doing lots of different things, which no doubt we can talk about on the show.
And in fact, I'd like to get to the... We'll hold on the boats if we may. If I can ask you to put the headphones on now, Prime Minister, and have the microphone right in front of you so that you can get the benefit of everyone hearing. And your first question is going to be Jack in Guildford. Jack, you're through to the Prime Minister. Go ahead, Jack.
Morning. Prime Minister.
Hi.
I'm in my early 30s with a wife and 4 children to support. Been encouraged to invest in bricks and mortar and become homeowners. But when my current 2-year fixed rate expires at the end of this year, my new fixed rate will go up from £1,500 a month to £2,800 a month. As someone who works 7 days a week and has paid into the tax system since I left school without claiming a penny back from it, why do I feel like I'm being unfairly punished? And what can you do to help me?
Jack, thanks for calling. And it's a great question to start with, right? Because your situation is being faced by many across the country, and I'm incredibly sympathetic about it. I know you'll be anxious about what's going to happen to your mortgage when it comes up for repricing, and we're taking practical action that will help you and many others. So let me just tell you what you can do in the short term, and then I'll take a step back and tell you more broadly how we're going to help. In the short term, for you or anyone else who's worried about this, you should talk to your bank. And what we've agreed is a mortgage charter with the lending industry. So you can talk to your bank and you can do a couple of things with them. You could extend the term of your mortgage by, say, 5 or 10 years, or you could switch to an interest-only mortgage. Now, it sounds like from your payments that you've got a particularly large mortgage. So a typical payment for someone in the country is about £800. But that would go up to about £1,000 a month at the current rates. But if you do one of the two things that I mentioned, which you can do with your bank at no change to your credit rating, that will save you hundreds of pounds a month on your mortgage payment. So it's very practical help for millions of families across the country
let's get
in
Jack
the short term.
Jack, how does that sound to you, Jack?
It sounds like I'm probably going to be... I'm already on a 35-year term, and that £2,800 was extending that term to 37 years. Now, bearing in mind I'm in my early 30s, I don't really want to be paying it off until I'm in the grave. So it something to think about. It's something to think about.
I mean, we could see another interest rate tomorrow, Prime Minister. It is widely predicted. It's up 14th month in a row.
As I said, look, and Jack, I said, please do talk to your bank, because as I said, everyone's situation is going to be slightly different. But a typical mortgage in the UK, right, for your listeners, as I said, typical mortgage, people have about 17 years outstanding on it. So you can extend it by 5 or 10 years. It will save you hundreds of pounds. But look, Jack, the best way for me to help you, your family and everyone else is to bring inflation down. Now, I know people will probably be, they're listening or they're watching me on telly and they're like, oh, God, he's banging on about inflation again. This kind of slightly abstract economic concept, but it's not abstract. It's inflation that is causing everyone problems with their bills. It's inflation, which means that the Bank of England is having to put up interest rates. And the quicker we get inflation down, the quicker we can ease some of these pressures. And that's why, you've got to trust me, and you've seen me do it during the pandemic. I know how to manage the economy for everyone. I will bring inflation down. I will make the decisions that are necessary, which are not easy, but you can trust me to do that on your behalf and everyone else's, because the quicker we bring inflation down, the quicker we can start bringing interest rates down and ease that pressure for homeowners like you.
You are aware, and of course I should tell listeners, you can watch this, by the way, watch us live on Global Player. Prime Minister, you are aware that we are almost certainly going to have another rise again tomorrow, 14th month in a row. In the past, you've told people, hold their nerve. They can't. Some of them can't hold their nerve, Prime Minister. They cannot make the payments.
Well, that's why we've put in place these easements. As I said, this mortgage charter
will go to his 70s potentially.
Well, it's fair, but this is really important that we don't want people to lose their homes. I want people to be able to afford their mortgages. And remember, there is an asset sitting behind most people's mortgage, right? There's a home that they own. And again, it's hard for every individual situation. On average, most people have a mortgage worth about £140,000 on a house that's worth about twice that, right? So there's a good amount of equity that they've got. Our job is to protect that for them. That's their savings that they've built up. Now, if you do some of the things I'm talking about, extend the term or switch to an interest-only mortgage, that will give you that relief in the short term, save you hundreds of pounds a month. And and when I say we've got to stick with it, we've got to stick with the plan.
All right.
The best way for me to help everyone is to bring inflation down, as I'm determined to do. Right. And that requires me to make some decisions, whether it's on public sector pay or not borrowing or having to say no to some people about things. But look, you've got to trust me to do that. That's what a responsible Prime Minister should do. That's what I will do to bring inflation down for all of you.
Jack, good luck to you, sir. We go to Richmond, and it is that Richmond. And Joe, you're through to the Prime Minister and your local MP. Joe, go ahead.
My Richmond.
Your Richmond,
right,
yes.
Not your Richmond.
I don't live there, but yes, Richmond, Yorkshire. Go ahead, Joe.
Yeah. Well, our Richmond, but yes. Morning, Rishi.
Hi, Joe.
It's Joe Foster here, and I'm a small business owner. I've got 2 small businesses here in the beautiful Richmond, North Yorkshire. I don't suppose you've heard the news, but last week was a very sad one here. 4 of our very well-established small independent businesses announced that they're shutting their doors because keeping going is just no longer financially viable. And talking to other fellow small businesses, not just here, I mean, to be fair, around the country, many more are on the brink. And asked why, what people are saying, and they're saying it all over social media and in person, they're quoting your Tory policies as the reason why. Everything from increased taxes, soaring cost, impact of Brexit, difficulty finding staff, all combined with the fact that it was your government that crashed the economy and left people without any spare disposable income to spend. So, I mean, I know obviously we're here in a rural economy. It's a nightmare for anybody. But in rural economies and communities like ours, where small businesses are our lifeblood, I mean, it's really serious. So my question to you is, what are you going to do about the fact that your Tory policies are causing small businesses to shut up shop?
Thanks, Joe. Always lovely to hear from you. No, look, Joe and I don't, as you can probably tell, share the same politics. We've had healthy debates on Brexit in the past, where we have a strongly.
I don't think there's much point asking if she votes Conservative.
No. She was very upset that I supported Brexit, but I think that was the right thing to do. And I don't think that's the reason that some businesses are struggling at the moment. I think it has a lot to do with energy bills. Actually, it has a lot to do with energy bills, and it has a lot to do with inflation. When I'm out and about talking to businesses, whether it's at home in North Yorkshire or anywhere else, energy bills are obviously a big challenge at the moment. Thankfully, they are now coming down, and the support that the government's put in place has made a difference. But there's a couple of other things that were raised. I think it's worth talking about. One is access to staff. And that is a particular concern, not just in rural areas, but more generally, making sure businesses can get the staff that they need. Now, one of the things we're doing to help with that is reforming the welfare system. Now, because I think at the moment, what we can do is support people into work, better for them, better for the labour market and businesses. So we're reforming the welfare system, which is meaning people are moving off welfare into work. But also,
but
particularly
not got customers. In fact, Joe, you might not be aware. This was actually in the Guardian newspaper yesterday. I don't know if you're aware of this. The businesses that are closing in your constituency, Prime Minister, are the York House Antiques later this year, the Fleece Hotel, Crossview Tea Rooms and Ravensworth Nurseries. And in one of those businesses, they're losing £10,000 a month. And to quote the business owner, nobody is buying anything. There's no cash, Prime Minister.
Well, look, every business is going to have slightly different circumstances. But as you can actually see, I've been out and about a lot around the country in the last week or two. I was actually just at the beer festival yesterday, talking to lots of landlords, breweries. Many of them were telling me that actually business is good, that footfall is up, that they're seeing confidence return.
These businesses are closing in your own backyard.
But businesses, and that's obviously sad. And I said one or two of the businesses you mentioned I know personally, and I'm obviously sad to hear that. Now, every business is going to have different circumstances, and that what happens in economy, businesses are always opening as well and starting up, and I've seen lots of that when I've been out and about recently, which is great to see. But look, what's the practical things that we're doing to help businesses? Because look, I come from a small business family. I talked about my mum. I worked for her. She ran a pharmacy. I did her books, right? That's what I did growing up. I did my mum's accounts, made sure we could meet payroll. We did that for years and years. So I grew up in a small business. I cleaned the shop at the weekend on Sundays.
That's
I know
not going to
what a
help
struggle
the
it is.
Fleece Hotel, the Ravensworth Nurseries.
So let me tell you what we are doing. For both of those types of businesses, this year, there's a 75% reduction on their business rates bill. So if you talk to most small retailers, pubs, high street restaurants, cafes, tea rooms, etc., business rates are a thing that will constantly get raised. Because of the policies we've put in place, there's a 75% cut on their business rates bill this year. That's massive saving, worth thousands of pounds for a typical small retailer, cafe or pub. We also, for small businesses, about 40% of them no longer pay any employer's national insurance. Because of something we have called the employment allowance, which is, again, to ease that burden. I increased that as Chancellor. So now, as I said, about 40% of small businesses don't pay any employer's national insurance.
Okay.
But look, I know things are tough. The best way for me to actually help people is to bring inflation down. Why? Because it will ease the pressures on those businesses. But also, if we bring inflation down, people will have more money to spend.
And you accept they haven't got money to spend now, as these people in these businesses in your constituency?
Because of inflation. It's not just in my patch, it's across the country.
But that Joe has referenced.
Right.
Okay.
But inflation is what is eating into people's pockets. It's into their pay packets, into their savings. That's why inflation is so bad, and we've got to root it out. And when we do, and when inflation comes back down, it will be completely transformative for how people feel about their situation and what they're spending their money on. And that's why it's so important that we get it down. It will have so many other benefits.
I look forward to you meeting with Joe at a later date. We must move on. Sarah's in Liverpool. Sarah, you're through to the Prime Minister. Go ahead. Your question. Good morning.
Good morning, Nick.
Yes, Sarah.
In the light of last week's climate report and Britain's pledge to get to net zero, do you think that you are being hypocritical by allowing oil and gas exploration in the North Sea by granting new licences, bearing in mind that the stocks of North Sea gas and oil are dwindling and have been for a very long time?
Sarah, thanks for the question. I think this is really important, actually. I'm so glad you asked. Look, I care about net zero. I've got 2 young kids. I care about leaving them an environment and a climate in better state than we found it and I found it in. But we're going to do that in a proportionate and in a pragmatic way. But on this question of North Sea licences, I 100% believe that what I'm doing is right. I'll tell you why. If you look at the independent forecasts and estimates, even when we meet our net zero target in 2050, around a quarter of our energy will still come from fossil fuels. I don't think people quite realise that, right? But that's the case. So then the question you have to ask yourself is, given that, where would we prefer to have that energy come from? I'm pretty clear that it's better to have it from here at home. Why? Because it's better for our security, so we're not more reliant on foreign dictators like Vladimir Putin. It's good for our economy and jobs. We just had a question about how do we support businesses. Well, 200,000 people are employed in that industry, thousands of businesses, and I'd like to support them. It's also good for our NHS. You asked about that earlier, Nick, because you know what? That generates an enormous amount of tax revenue that we can use to pay for the NHS. And lastly, and for Sarah, it's good for us to talk about this as well, it's better for the environment. Because if I have to get that energy from halfway around the world and ship it here, it will come with 3 or 4 times the carbon emissions. So any which way you look at it, the right sensible thing to do is to use the energy we have here at home as we transition to net zero, which we are going to do. But this is a part of doing that and doing it properly.
I have to challenge you. Chris Skidmore, your Conservative colleague who led a review into net zero, says that this is on the wrong side of history. They will not look favourably on the decision taken today. Antonio Guterres, you know who, that's of course the United Nations General Secretary, says, and I quote, "The 2 truly dangerous radicals are the countries that are increasing the production of fossil fuels." That makes you a dangerous radical.
No, because we're reducing our reliance over time on fossil fuels.
But you're increasing the production.
At home.
Yeah,
which is the right... we're not
the
actually...
truly dangerous radicals are the countries that are increasing the production of fossil fuels, says the United Nations General Secretary General.
Well, so what I would say, not just to him, but more generally,
and to your colleague Chris Skidmore,
let's look at the record. Which G7 country out of the large countries, America, Italy, France, Germany, us, Canada, Japan, which of those countries has decarbonised fastest over the past years or decades? Which one? It's the UK.
Okay.
Right? So
okay.
We should not take any lectures from anybody about our record. Our record is fantastic. It's better than everyone else's. So I think we can take comfort in that. And are we doing the right thing? Of course we're doing the right thing. We're transitioning to net zero. We're increasing the amount of renewable energy. Again, I'd say that's to Secretary General and everyone else. Where's the largest offshore wind farm in the world? Here in the UK. Where's the second largest? Here in the UK. Third largest, fourth largest here in the UK.
Your point is well
Where
made.
do we get half of our electricity from this year? Renewables, right? So we are making progress, but it is absolutely right to get energy from here at home as we've transitioned.
How have you sold this to 2 of the most important people in your life? I know how keenly you love your family. You told my LBC colleague Andrew Marr that the questions your 2 daughters, both pre-teens, asked you the most or concerns are climate change. How have you sold that to the girls?
Well, I'm sure it's something we'll be discussing over the summer.
Haven't they said, "Daddy, what are you doing?"
Of course, no. Well, actually, we haven't got into this in detail.
Okay,
only
let's posit that they're going to say, "Daddy, what are you doing?"
And I'll explain it to them in exactly the way I have. And we have good chat round our table about all these things.
But
and I've got 2 girls
the boss of the UN
who have
says you're a radical, Daddy.
Quite different views on things actually between the 2 of them, which is fun at home. So I got ready-made focus group at home. But look, in the same way that I'm explaining it to Sarah and everyone else listening, I'd make the same case to them. We are going to get to net zero. That's my commitment. But even when we're there, we will still need fossil fuels.
Okay.
So is it better to have them from here at home, supporting people's jobs, the economy, public services like the NHS, and being less reliant on Vladimir Putin? And by the way, fewer carbon emissions rather than shipping things here from halfway around the world. I think those are all just sensible, practical reasons. So yes, that is the right thing to do.
You're confident you'll win them over?
I am, because I think on this topic, I think like most people, they don't approach it as some kind of, they're not eco-zealots. They're, they actually, I think, are open to sensible, practical arguments. As I think probably most of your listeners are as well.
Let's go to another one. Olivia's in Newcastle. Olivia, you're through to the Prime Minister. Go ahead.
Hi, I'm a junior doctor and I've been working as a junior doctor for the last 10 years now. I'm an A&E registrar and my experience is that frontline services are so stretched that we're in the position that you have had almost all healthcare workers going on strike this year. How do you think your refusal to negotiate with us improves morale or standards of care?
Well, Olivia, thanks for everything you and your colleagues do. You obviously do a fantastic job. I was talking earlier in the show about my family's involvement in the NHS and how personal it is to me. So thank you for that, first of all. We're all reliant on you, and it was a great privilege to celebrate 75 years with the NHS recently. Now, look, you and I, sadly, are just going to disagree on this, but I'm proud of what we've done. We've invested record sums in the NHS since I became Prime Minister. Not only that, just the other week we announced the first ever long-term workforce plan for the NHS, so we can deliver something that has been asked for decades, and for the first time as Prime Minister I've delivered it, which means that we will train more doctors, more nurses, more of everyone, in fact, dentists, GPs, everything, so we're less reliant on foreign-trained clinical staff. So that's the right long-term thing for the country that I've done and prioritised and put funding behind. And we're reforming how the NHS works to get people the care they need and supporting you and your colleagues to do that.
But more staff are leaving. They're jetting off to Australia, I read.
Actually, far fewer than people think. And we looked at that. We looked at that as part of considering how to reform the workforce. And that is a smaller phenomenon than people think. And, some of Olivia's colleagues have done that, but it's not the vast majority. So we think the current policy is right. But what I would say is, look, over 1 million NHS workers have accepted the government's pay deal. Many of them on salaries and incomes far lower than consultants and indeed Olivia and her colleagues. That's just the reality of it. And I'm really grateful to them, the 1 million NHS workers, there's several unions, all of whom accepted the government's offer, and the millions of other public sector workers like teachers and others who have also accepted the government's offer based on recommendations from the independent pay review bodies, not the government's view. This is an independent recommendation. Government accepted it. All these other unions and millions of public sector workers, including the NHS, have accepted it. Now, there are a few exceptions, including junior doctors and consultants. That's what's causing the waiting list to go up. I don't think that's right. I would say to them, I'm very grateful and respectful of the incredible job you do, but we all have a shared mission to bring the waiting list down. I've done my bit by backing the NHS with a long-term workforce plan and record funding, and I would ask people to think about accepting what is an independent offer and come and do the thing that I know you want to do, which is serve patients.
Let's get a quick response from a woman who's on the front line. Quick response, Olivia, if you would, before we move on. Olivia?
I think it's amazing that we're blaming the increasing in waiting lists on doctors going on strike. You're losing staff because we're undervalued, and it's not just doctors, it's everyone. We're all leaving. A happy workforce is your responsibility. You're the Prime Minister, you're the government, your staff aren't happy. That's your fault. And ultimately, that's not good for patients, because retaining staff is one of the bedrocks of making sure that you have good patient safety. You cannot keep the NHS running with the staff shortages that it has. Right. And to keep us here, you have to keep us happy. That is your job. Right. None of us are happy.
I would just say, Olivia, right, so if you look, when you have the time, please go look at the long-term workforce plan. It's the NHS.
I've read it. I get it. It's great. I love the fact that you're bringing in tons of new people, but there's going to be no one there to train or educate or supervise them. And you cannot be safe without senior staff on the wards training, educating and supervising.
So there's three parts of the plan, actually. So one is to train more people. The second one is to retain more people. So there's a whole section of the plan about improving retention, which I agree with you is important. And the third part of it is reforming how we work. And I think you said you're working in A&E as well. One of the things we're introducing are anaesthetist associates, which are a new role which will help provide high quality care to people. But look, fundamentally, you and I are not going to agree, because your union is asking for a 35% pay rise. I don't think that's reasonable. I don't think that's affordable. I don't think that's fair. Right. And millions of others have accepted the recommendations, and I would urge your union to do the same.
All right, let's go. We are on TikTok and Instagram at LBC. Yesterday we asked questions for you, Prime Minister. We have had literally thousands, many thousands. Let me pluck out two. Abdeslam asks, when will there be an election?
Well, that'll be announced in the normal way. But look, I've got 5 priorities that I've set out. I'm keen to deliver those.
What part of next year will it be, Prime Minister?
Oh, well, maybe I'll come back on your show at some point and we can talk
Early
about
half?
that nearer the time. I wouldn't like to speculate. But look, I've got a lot to get on with.
OK. Nathan says, what should happen to an MP who doesn't speak in Parliament in over a year and takes 2 months to officially resign? I think he might be talking about your colleague Nadine Dorries, who hasn't spoken since July of last year.
Yeah, look,
your view of Nadine?
Yeah, I think people deserve to have an MP that represents them wherever they are. And, it's just making sure that your MP is engaging with you, representing you, whether that's speaking in Parliament or being present in their constituencies, doing surgeries, answering your letters. That's a job of an MP, and all MPs should be held to that standard.
So she's failing in that, isn't she?
Well, at the moment, people aren't being properly represented, right? But that's, look, we'll have that. We'll have a strong Conservative candidate, Festus, who's doing a great job. He's Police and Crime Commissioner previously, or currently, and I think people there will see that we've got a fantastic candidate for them to represent them going forward.
And lastly, before we go to the calls, another business holder in Richmond says, why don't you get the extra money available from the tourist tax that's been campaigning about? This is the idea of bringing possibly £10 billion, I believe. I think it was the front page of one of the newspapers. Here we go, a £10 billion boost from scrapping tourist tax. Is that something you'd be prepared to do, Prime Minister?
I never, as a habit, would talk about tax policy for all the obvious reasons that has on markets and businesses and share prices. I don't know if this is your Richmond or
another show in your Richmond.
Well, it's probably worth pointing out that tax that they're talking about, essentially, I think 97% of the benefit of that goes to a very small area in central London.
So you don't see any merit.
So just from a kind of levelling up perspective, it was a very specifically concentrated tax break for people. But one thing we did do at the same time, which I think people forget, after we left the EU, we were able to change duty-free rules, which now mean you can leave the country and come back into the country with far more than you used to be able to. So for everyone who is able to get away and come back, when you're doing that, travelling around, your duty-free allowances are all far more generous now, and tax-free shopping at airports has all been improved as a result of the changes we made.
A relaxation of inheritance tax?
Again, wouldn't expect you to talk about tax policy, Nick, but nice try.
Angela's in Warrington. You're through to the Prime Minister. Angela, go ahead.
Hello, Prime Minister. Hi, Nick.
Hello.
Hi, Angela.
My question's on marquees, barges, hotels. I've always been a lifelong Tory, but unvetted illegal immigrants, what I call economic migrants coming over from, on boats, it's just not acceptable. I feel you're putting us in danger, and it's your duty as a Prime Minister to look after the UK citizens. When will this stop? What date can we expect it to change? Your
fifth promise was to stop the boats. I quote you directly, Prime Minister. When will they stop?
Well, it can't be soon enough, Angela. So, look, I am determined to grip this problem, right? And it's not easy, as I said when I announced it, and it won't happen overnight, but hopefully you can see I'm throwing absolutely everything at it. Because the current system is just simply unfair. I mean, you talked about barges. It's one of the many unfairnesses we have. We've got British taxpayers stumping up millions of pounds a day to house illegal migrants in hotels.
Why has the Bibi Stockholm been such a shambles?
It hasn't. No, it hasn't. Look, actually,
they
of all,
were due to go on yesterday, Prime Minister. They're not probably until next week.
I think the point here is not is it next week? Is it yesterday? The fact is, this is an example of me doing something different that hasn't been done before to help solve a serious problem, because I want to relieve the pressure.
Yet.
Yeah, well, it is in the process of being done. There is a barge here. People are going to be put on it, which will ease pressure in local communities.
Are you trying to put too many people on? Do you think? Is that the danger?
Not at all. Look, but let's take a step back, right? Let's take a step back. What are we trying to do, right? We're trying to end the unfairness of the current system.
Yes.
Right? Like, I mean, Angela talked about it. As I said, British taxpayers shouldn't be stumping up millions of pounds to house illegal migrants in hotels. That's wrong and it's unfair, and I want it to stop. It's unfair to the people who actually come here legally. People who wait their turn, follow the rules, are seeing other people jump the queue. That's not British,
right? Do they?
Well, they shouldn't be coming here illegally and jumping the queue. It's also unfair on people who are their lives are being put at an enormous risk as criminal gangs exploit them with these very dangerous crossings. And it's not unfair to all the people around the world that we do want to help, like we have done with Ukraine, because we're a generous and compassionate country. And if our system is being overwhelmed with people who are illegally queue jumping and who are not those people, that's not right. So any which way you look at it, this system isn't right, it isn't fair, it's not just or compassionate, and that's why I'm determined to stop it. And look, my new law...
We only have a minute to go.
Yeah, but look, so this is really important. We've just passed a new law in Parliament that no other government's done anything like it, which will mean that if you come here illegally, you won't be able to stay, and we will have the ability to remove you.
Will Bibi Stockholm be in operation next week?
Yeah, the Bibi Stockholm will be in operation as soon as it's passed all the checks and regulations, as soon as possible, right?
Okay.
I mean, that's the key thing. But look, this new law that we've passed is incredibly important, and it's one of the many things. Together with my new deals with Albania and France, we've returned 2,500 illegal migrants back to Albania already. We're making a difference. I'm going to keep going on this. I'm determined to fix it. I'm going to throw everything at it. Look, there's an array of people who want me to fail. Right, whether that's the Labour Party, who voted 70 times against the bill, whether that's these dodgy lawyers, a subset, a minority of lawyers, that the Daily Mail has rightly exposed, whether it's these criminal gangs. There's lots of people who are lined up to try and stop me, but I'm going to keep going until we stop the boats.
When we first met in detail, it was around this time last year. You hadn't had a holiday. It was during the hustings. You hadn't had a holiday for 3 years. I remember we talked about that up in Leeds, if you recall, when we first met. Are you getting a holiday this year?
Yeah, I'm actually going off on holiday this afternoon.
Oh.
So I will. The country will be left in the capable hands of the Deputy Prime Minister. So we're having our first proper family summer holiday in, I think, a few years for sure.
That's 3 or 4 years.
Which I'm very much looking forward to spending time with my kids. I promise
discussing climate change with the girls.
Yes, maybe some of that, but also where we're going to California, which is where I met my wife. So it's very special to us. But the kids are very excited because I'm taking them to Disneyland.
Okay.
Yeah, although
who's their prime Disney character at the moment? Who do you think?
They have sadly they have grown out of all the princesses, which was a great phase. But I'm very excited. There's a new, well, not that new anymore, Star Wars bit of Disneyland, which I'm very excited about. So they rather fear that we're going to have to spend more time there than they would like. So.
Okay. And lastly, how does a Prime Minister and dad of 2, I would imagine, fairly boisterous girls, how do you relax? Because you don't have a glass of wine at all, do you?
No, I don't. No,
I read your wife does like the occasional glass.
Yes, she might, but I don't. But
so how do you relax?
It's spending time with my girls, which
Yeah.
I don't do enough. So this will be really special for us, and it's nice. We rarely get family time. It was nice. We had a night out the other evening to go see Barbie, which was fun.
What did you make of that movie?
What did I make of it? Actually, you know what? It was good escapism for me. It was very pink. It was good escapism. No, it was good. It was good fun. We had a nice night out. But that's how I relax. It's family time, spending time with my girls.
I don't want to be responsible for making you miss the plane, so we better end it there. And I'll keep you to your word, Prime Minister. When you want to announce the next general election, you know my number. You've got my email, and I look forward to it. Rishi Sunak appearing. Have a good break with your family. Thank you. Rishi Sunak appearing on LBC. It's 9:31.
Speaking to LBC, the Prime Minister has insisted the UK's record on climate is better than everyone else's. He's insisted new oil and gas exploration in the North Sea is the right thing to help meet Britain's net zero targets. Rishi Sunak also said the Prime Minister's asylum barge in Dorset will enter service as soon as possible. The first people are yet to board the Bibby Stockholm over reported safety concerns. The Prime Minister says he's done his bit to reduce NHS waiting lists and has blamed junior doctors' strikes for treatment delays. Taking a call from a doctor, Mr Sunak urged them